Some people think retiring at 65 and broke is a win, and this guy actually defends it. Let's see if that's actually true. All right, so I'm gonna start watching this first part of the video, and really the first 10 seconds tells everything, right? Just see how this financial advisor opens this video up. Not to mention, of course, the title of this video is I'm 62 with $750,000. How to retire early and when to get that Social Security.
You're 62 and saved up $750,000. You're tired of working and you want to know, should I retire? Can I retire? Do I have enough? How long will my money last? These are the questions that may be keeping you up at night and stopping you from living your best life in retirement.
So hopefully you're not shooting up like that woman is, right? You know, getting all shocked, like, oh, what am I gonna do? I don't have enough in retirement. Now, I'll tell you, I've watched this whole video, and you're welcome to do it too. This guy does a decent job explaining the basics of retirement, you know, how much can you pull out and everything else. He even talks about, he actually does some pretty good job talking about how much you could be pulling out on a very conservative basis. And he even talks about Social Security and how to access that. But here's the biggest issue I have. He actually says, I'm 62 with $750,000. How to retire early, and then when to get Social Security, right? Think about this. 62 right now, at least up through now, has been the average retirement age. That's the average. He's saying retire early at 62. Why are we seeing this trend that people are now retiring later? Now it's supposed to be like 65, 66, 67. There's even mutual fund money managers saying you should not be retiring until you're 70, right? So now we keep pushing back this retirement age longer and longer in our own minds. And the question is, why do we have to do that? Why do we have to wait till 62? Is that really retiring early? Because that's not early. Again, like I said, arguably, if you look at the statistics, people retire about 62 or have been up to this point. But I do see a trend where it's going longer. And so when he's talking about trying to retire early with the $750,000, he's talking about how to stretch this money out. And just so you know, when he shows it to you, the only way you can retire with that $750,000, especially when he's trying to show a $50,000 a year type of lifestyle, is to have Social Security. If it weren't for the Social Security, you wouldn't make it with that $750,000. The sad thing is, $750,000 is more than the average retiree has. And I'm not just talking because people will say, oh, well, everybody's spenders. No, there are a lot of good, disciplined savers out there. Literally tens of millions of people have been saving diligently in their 401ks for decades. And yet, they don't even have this much money, especially by 62. This is why even my own father, in a very similar situation, was 61, asking if he could retire. And I said, well, Dad, you know, you're 61, you can't even get Social Security yet. No. In fact, if you try to live off the income you have right now or the money you have in savings, if it doesn't earn much, you only have about 5 or 6 years to live on anyways. And so he worked another 10 years until he finally retired in his 70s, right? And even now, to this point, not only is he had been draining his accounts, right? And again, this guy is like a penny pinching saver. He's not spending a lot of money. He's spending just what he needs to, trying to be as cheap as possible. And now he's like, well, now my next resource is my equity in my house. How do I tap into that? You know, now I'm in my 80s, right? This is the problem we're seeing happen so often. And so, again, people think that retirement is in your 60s. Does it have to be? You know, do you have to wait till you're at least Social Security age? And that's the other argument he makes too. It's like, oh, well, I've just got to work, you know, if I don't take it at 62, maybe I can defer and wait till I'm 67 or even into my 70s before I take out my full retirement from Social Security. And then things are better, right? And he even says, yeah, maybe you even just start taking from your own account when you're 62. Take from your account at first and then wait till your full retirement age and then start having supplement from the Social Security come in. And again, there's nothing wrong with what he's teaching, but the mindset, the whole retire early at 62, that is wrong. Most people I talk to, when they want to retire early, it's typically in your 40s and 50s, not in your 60s. And if you're trying to save in the typical retirement plans you've been told to save in, and you want to retire early, guess what? You're going to have a big gotcha because when you have your 401ks and IRAs and you say, okay, I want to retire at 50, and then you say, oh crap, now I got to wait another 9.5 years before I can actually pull the money out without the 10% penalty, plus I'm going to tax on this money anyways. And so you get stuck, right? You get stuck in this vortex, right? You know, where it's just like this toilet bowl where you just have to keep waiting and waiting and waiting. And you hope in the meantime, while you're waiting, the market doesn't tank and all of a sudden delay your retirement longer. That's what happened with my dad, is that the whole Great Recession, global financial crisis hit, and then of course it pushed out his retirement years longer to the point where he's finally forced into retirement due to age and health restrictions. And that's, again, why do we want to waste so many years of our life doing that? So 62, not good enough, right? 65, that normal retirement age, not good enough. So you got to make sure that whatever you're saving in is got to match your goal. If you do want to retire early, if you truly want to do that, you got to make sure you're starting to save in things that aren't going to penalize you for tapping into it early. This is why our clients don't use 401ks and IRAs as much. They realize, I don't want to add more to it. Even if they have in the past, some of them even talked about cashing out their 401ks and IRAs, even if it meant a 10% penalty and taxes. Why? I'll give you an example. I had one client where he was 53 years old, and he said, you know what? I want cash flow now. I don't want to wait till I'm 60 to retire. I want to do it as soon as possible. What needs to happen? Well, his biggest pool of money was the one he locked up into prison with his IRAs and 401ks. And so we looked at the options. We even looked at, well, what if you did cash it out, had a 10% penalty and tax? Maybe we split it up over different years, so it's not taxed all at once. Maybe you can keep the tax bracket a little bit lower, keep more of your money. And the crazy thing is, because he had 5 or 6 years to make money with that money, it made up for that 10% penalty. The truth is, by the way, just so you know, cashing out your IRAs and 401ks, you're going to get taxed on them down the road anyways. So it's only the 10% penalty you have to worry about, right? And so that's what he realized pretty quickly. He's like, as long as I make at least 10% more in my investment over time, which I can easily do compared to the market, I can do that. And so that's what he did. He started cashing out, investing in real estate, creating passive income, and that allowed him to retire by his mid to late 50s versus waiting until his 60s. I've had several other clients too. I have one client that they want to do it in their 40s. Same thing. One thing we did too in their situation, they were trying to pay off their house. They had been paying it down very faithfully. And I said, well, you guys want to go study abroad, right? And I say study abroad, meaning they want to homeschool their kids abroad and live abroad. They want to be expats. They want to live in like some Central American country like Costa Rica or Mexico. And so I said, well, your biggest asset is your home. What if we liquidate that? Instead of keeping that money in prison, sell it, because you're going to be moving anyways, sell that property, don't even rent it out, use the equity, and then use that to go into other real estate investments to then fund your lifestyle. And that's where they're now living in Cabo San Lucas, right? They're able to live that kind of lifestyle doing that. And so that's the thing, is that we can get your money liquid, get it in your power and your possession, you can get it out. Most of our clients start to realize they don't want to lock it up in 401ks and IRAs. If they want to retire early, the place they store it, rather than just a simple bank savings account and then investing it, is they'll often store it inside their infinite banking policies, because they know they can get to that money at any time. It has the same tax rules as the Roth IRA, but none of the 59.5 rule. So you don't have to worry about the 10% penalties or possible taxes, and things like that. It's literally available for you to use now to create cash flow now. So people have stopped using their 401ks. They've stopped locking their money away in 529 plans for the kids that may or may not go to college. They start putting in their infinite banking policies as a storage, and then using that money to then get out and invest in creating passive income right now. That is the key difference, and that's the only way to retire early. That's how I did it before the time I was 40. It was doing the same exact thing. That's how many of our other clients have done the same thing as well, where they've been in, it's funny when they get depressed that they're like 53 years old, and they're like, oh, I can't retire yet. When before they had no hope of retiring possibly until at least their 60s or 70s, right? So again, it's always perspective. But that's the cool thing, is that imagine if you could actually be able to retire 10, 20 years earlier than planned on. I had a client where, again, he had a good amount of money saved up in his accounts, but the financial advisor said he could only live on $30,000 a year. That same money he took out, he was able to invest it, and he was only 60 years old this time. He wasn't even 62 or 65. Was able to invest it to generate $130,000 a year, allowing him to retire then, at that moment. He was able to retire, and by the way, he passed away when he was 64 years old. So he was able to live his life versus keep working until he died, literally. He was able to have at least 4 years of his life that he was able to enjoy with his family. He was able to work on projects he wanted to do, where he was able to volunteer his time, teach his sons about investing, and it took him to different conferences and stuff with investments than people that we connected him to. And as a result, he was able to create the life he wanted to right now. That's why I love this. I love passive income, because passive income is what buys your freedom. It buys your time back. And isn't that what we all want? If you want to see how you can make that work for you today, go to moneyripples.com/consulting. You can actually even fill out our passive income calculator to see how much passive income you could be creating right now in the next 12 months. Not 30 years from now, but right now. Check that out. You might be able to retire early as well.